Thank you for the intro. First of all, is it anyone's first long con today? Okay, quite a few. I haven't been here actually since they had it at the Goodwill, so that was like, I don't even know how many years ago, but missed that place. So today I'll be doing my presentation here, the Kia Boys, a crash course in automotive cybersecurity, also known as car hacking. So imagine you're driving out to the cabin. The sun's out, you're listening to CJOB, and everything feels normal. Suddenly the air conditioning starts blasting, the radio switches on at full blast, and the windshield wipers are just going crazy. Then the real trouble starts. You feel the transmission disconnect. You're hitting the gas, nothing's going on. You try to hit the brakes, nothing's happening. The car is no longer yours to control. So this exact situation played out in 2015 when two security researchers, Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek, demonstrated a remote hack on a Jeep Cherokee. So from a laptop miles away, they were able to take control of the vehicle's critical functions, documenting the whole thing in research papers and a pretty entertaining YouTube video. So they reported this to Chrysler, and it actually led to a massive recall of 1.4 million vehicles, so pretty huge. And this event in particular shook up the entire auto industry to the reality that the cars are no longer just a mechanical machine getting you around. It's actually more of a sophisticated network of computers now. So what is car hacking? So simply put, it's the exploitation of vulnerabilities in a vehicle's software, network, or hardware. Modern cars can have over 100 million lines of code and dozens of tiny computers inside of them, also known as ECUs. These are electronic control units, by the way. And so these control everything from your power windows to your infotainment system to your brakes and engine. And just like with anything else, if there's a flaw in the code, it can lead to disaster. So today, I'm not trying to make anyone into a car hacker, just looking to give a little bit of a crash course. So we're going to briefly cover how a modern car's internal network works, the different ways a hacker can gain access, and finally we'll touch on a bit on why automotive cybersecurity could be a critical field for the future of transportation. By the end, you should have a much clearer understanding of the technology that gets you down the road. So you might think that your modern car is your friend. He looks like this. The modern car is not your friend. He's not as slick as he seems. So how do we get to the point where a car can be controlled by a laptop? To understand that, we need to look under the hood. If you bought a car in the last 10 or so years, you've probably realized you aren't driving just a mechanical machine. You're operating sort of a network of mini computers. And so what led me to this topic actually was I was upgrading my car from an early 2000s Mazda, and this thing had like a CD player, no Bluetooth, nothing fancy. And when I bought the new car, I was just like, wow, a lot of tech going on here. What could be some of the weaknesses? So let's look at some ECUs here. These are pretty essential. So at the heart of this network, these are the electronic control units. And so they're not just general purpose computers, they're microcontrollers. They're basically systems on a chip with their own processor, memory, inputs and outputs. There's an ECU for the engine management, controlling the shift in transmission. There's one for the anti-lock brakes, one for the airbag deployment, and so on. So a cheap basic car might have around 30 of these ECUs, while a modern luxury one might have over 100. And each of these ECUs need to communicate with each other constantly for your car to function. So for example, when you press the unlock button on your door, and that door has to tell the central body unit that the door is now open, which will probably turn on the interior lights kind of thing. So how do they all talk? How do they all get along there? So that's the CAN bus. So that's the controller area network. And The best way to think of a CAN bus is it's like a chat room where all the ECUs are chatting in. And so technically they use a message-based protocol with no specific destination or source address. So when one ECU wants to send a message, it doesn't send anything privately. It just broadcasts that data packet to the entire network. So for example, the ECU for anti-lock braking, I might send a message out with one address, say ABC, and that data payload that contains the current wheel speed. That message ID is critical. It identifies the type of data, and it also dictates the priority on the bus. So lower IDs have a higher priority, and this ensures that brake message isn't kind of overwhelmed by a message coming from the radio. So this broadcast design is robust and efficient for real-time control, but it has a fundamental security flaw that stems from when it was designed. So the original CAN bus was designed in the 80s, and it has no native authentication or encryption. And so it's built on a principle of inherent trust. So that means if a hacker got access to that bus, they can inject their own malicious packets. They can spoof that message ID of the brake controller, and every other ECU will accept that forged message ID. So there's no built-in way to verify who actually sent that message. And okay, so how do you get into the network? So this is called the ODB port. That's what your mechanic, he's plugging in that computer into and getting some diagnostics. ODB. OBB. Sorry guys. Thank you. Thank you. So that port has been mandatory in every car since 1996. So an intended purpose is it's a diagnostic tool. Check for error codes, troubleshoot problems. And it provides direct access to that central nervous system or the CAN bus. And so by plugging in a device to that port, you can listen to all the messages being sent, and more importantly, you can start sending your own. So let me see if I got this. The OBD port is the front door to that network. There's different ways to get access to the car here, but we'll start with this. This is the physical aspect. There's also the wireless proximity and remote attacks. So the physical aspect is the fundamental type of car hacking, right? So it requires the hacker to be inside of your car, and they can just plug whatever they've got to go right into that OBD port that we just talked about. And with that, they could record the CAN message that sends when you press the unlock on your key fob, and then they could just replay that exact message later to unlock all the doors. So that's the essentials of a basic replay attack. The downside is that they do have to be in your car, so I don't know why they would be unlocking it since they're already in there, but that's how it works. Now this is the Kia boys here. So I put that in the title of my presentation. It was a popular viral attack on the internet a few years ago, and it's a pretty good example of a non-technical physical attack. So on a lot of Kia and Hyundai cars between 2011 and 2021, they actually neglected to put any immobilizer in the vehicles. I don't know if it was cost cutting, it remains to be seen. But that immobilizer basically, talks to your key there, and you can't complete the connection to the engine if that signal isn't matching up. But since there was no immobilizer, the Kia boys, all they had to do was pry open your steering wheel column, and what would be left is a small metal nub that could be turned to complete that connection to the engine. And that's where that USB cable came in. It was a perfect fit to turn that key, and that was the essentials of the hack. All they had to do was get in your car and pry that off. So, when I first heard that, I was like, oh, yeah, USB cable, they're hacking the cars, but it turned out just to be a very, very simple problem that the manufacturers created for themselves by not including an immobilizer. So yeah, it led to a massive amount of spikes, a spike of thefts around the United States and even in Canada. So hopefully nobody was affected by that one. This one's pretty cool. It's called wireless proximity attacks. So this is like one of the attacks that really brought me in, especially if any of you have seen the Nicolas Cage movie Gone in 60 Seconds from the early 2000s. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, many modern cars use passive keyless entry systems. So you walk up to your car and the car unlocks, and this works because your car is broadcasting at all times a low frequency signal, typically around 125 kilohertz. And this acts as a wake-up challenge and has a very short range, only a couple of meters. So when your fob enters this field, it's powered by the signal and it wakes up. It then authenticates itself by sending back its own ultra-high frequency signal, usually around 315 or 433 megahertz. And so the car's security relies on the basic simple principle that the round-trip time for that low frequency and ultra-high frequency communication is incredibly fast, and that proves that the fob is physically nearby. So what a hacker would do is they would exploit this with a relay attack. So they use two synchronized devices here to essentially stretch that communication channel. Because it's a problem, and one of the first things you do when a lot of people at least get into their home, and they'll put their key basically right near the front door. And so device A is held by an attacker near your house, or it could even be near your pocket, and it spoofs that car's low frequency challenge to wake up your key fob, and then it immediately captures that ultra high frequency response. And then that's transmitted to the other guy over here, kind of creepily by that car. And he's holding his own device to amplify that and relay it to the car. And so the vehicle can receive that signal at full strength with maybe a bit longer of a delay, but usually within the system's tolerance. So basically the car is tricked into thinking the key's right next to it, and boom, the car's unlocked and the push to start's enabled. So yeah, and the necessary software for this can often be built with an SDR or a software-defined radio, which is very accessible. And this is why it's one of the most dominant methods of high-tech vehicle theft today. So key fobs aren't the only entry point in the short-range attack. Every protocol added to a vehicle introduces a new potential vector. So your car's Bluetooth infotainment system, for example, is a prime target. The Bluetooth stack is a complex piece of software that handles pairing, authentication, and various profiles. And basically, researchers have discovered that classic software vulnerabilities like buffer overflows or improper parsing of packets can overwhelm this system. And it's not just about, Rick rolling the person in the car, playing some Rick Astley on there, because that infotainment head unit can often act as a gateway to that CAN bus internal network. And so a compromised Bluetooth stack can become a critical pivot point, allowing an attacker to inject malicious messages right into the CAN bus. Now, this brings me to the most serious type of attack, and it's a completely remote attack. It's the coolest one, but surprisingly, there actually hasn't been a reported criminal attack where someone was driving their car and it actually did get taken over. I'm sorry to say, because it's pretty neat. But I guess the reality is that these thieves, they're not really interested in driving you off the road. They're a lot more interested in stealing your car. So going that far is kind of out of their interest. But how it works is especially for the 2015 Jeep attack. I'll cover that here. So the researchers discovered that the firmware on this Jeep Uconnect infotainment head exposed a service on an open port over the Sprint cellular network. And so this vulnerability allowed them to do some remote code execution, giving them a foothold on the system. And what they did next was reflash some firmware of a secondary microcontroller also in that head unit. And then from there, they were able to inject messages directly to the CAN bus and take over the steering, brakes, and transmission. So yeah, this would be a holy grail type of attack because a single vulnerability in the TCU's firmware, it could be scalable technically. So it could be weaponized or automated to attack an entire fleet of cars, and all from a safe and anonymous distance. So I'll cover quickly some basic tools of the trade here. So as you might have guessed, the barrier to entry is surprisingly low. Many of these effective tools are affordable, and in most cases, they can be basically free. So one of the first ones here is a standard USB cable, and with an adapter on it to that OBD port, and it basically acts as a translator from that CAN bus to your laptop. So you can order these on Amazon, and yeah, they're small, relatively inexpensive, and it's the first step to unlocking that network there. Once you're connected, you need some programs to interpret the data. So the most common tool set is a free open source suite called CANutils. And it's like a Swiss Army knife for car hacking. It includes some simple command line tools that let you CAN dump. And that's like it's like a wiretap for the CAN bus. It shows you every single message being broadcast between all the ECUs in real time. And then the other side of it is CAN send, where you're doing the opposite. So you're sending your own crafted messages onto that CAN bus, for instance, to trick the speedometer or unlock the doors. For a more visual approach, you can even use some traditional network analysis tools like Wireshark. This might make it a bit easier for you to help color code and filter those messages. And then the other side of this is have an IC sim going. So testing these commands on a real car can be dangerous and could lead to permanent damage. So you might want to use a simulator if you're playing around with this. And the most popular one I found was Instrument Cluster Simulator, or IC Sim. And it's a free program that gives you a virtual car dashboard on your screen. So you can send commands to it from your terminal and watch that virtual speedometer needle jump, or make the turn signals go, or anything you'd like, really. And yeah, it's basically a nice legal sandbox for you to play around with those CAN bus commands. So I mean, yeah. So that's a lot of what the current car hacking landscape looks like these days. And as cars become smarter, I would say some security conversations around that become more critical. So it would seem we're heading towards a future of fully connected and maybe even autonomous vehicles one day. So your car might talk to other cars to avoid collisions. They might interface with traffic lights to redirect the route, things of that nature. And so the stakes get a lot higher when these cars are driving themselves, and people could potentially control an entire fleet of autonomous vehicles. And so, yeah, this is why I think the field is very interesting. So what the industry is doing currently to fight back, they're in a constant race with the hackers. So one of the first things they do is segmentation. So that big kind of group chat of the CAN bus is going to be split up, and they're going to break out the critical systems. They're going to break out the critical systems from each other. So the steering and braking aren't really going to interface with the infotainment anymore, and this is already in effect in a lot of modern cars. So this way, if the hacker does get in through your radio, they're not going to be able to jump over to your brakes. On the encryption and authentication part of it, they're going to there's new standards basically being developed to encrypt the messages as they travel over the network, and that means like the ECU specific to your car are going to have to verify their identity. And then finally, just like with a lot of anti-intrusion software for computers, they're going to build that into the vehicles as well. And that means they're constantly monitoring for suspicious activity, and if an unauthorized message is detected, the system can block it and alert the driver. So yeah, the main points we covered today. So, you know, the ECUs are the brains, and you know, they're doing their own thing. And if for certain types of cars, you know, ones that haven't been upgraded by the industry or with no software patches, it is possible to take them over and kind of spoof them there. So, and the vulnerabilities can be high tech and low tech, as you can see with the Kia Boys attack, but also with the Jeep Cherokee attack. And 3, the future is connected. Thank you.
Questions, please. That was fast.